Hey everybody. So a great topic of discussion for the NHL is always bad contracts, and there are a lot of them around the league. So what I wanted to do was try and narrow that list down to the 10 worst contracts in the NHL based on what the player's being paid versus what value they bring to the lineup. And believe me, this was not easy. This took a lot of thinking and a lot of narrowing down and throwing some guys off the list, putting other guys on. But I finally put together a list of what I think are the 10 worst contracts in the NHL right now in 2021, heading into this new season. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we begin, I just ask that you please hit that subscribe button and thumbs up. It helps out an absolute ton and is greatly appreciated. But let's get started here, taking a look at what I think are the 10 worst contracts in the league right now. Coming in at number 10, we have PK Subban from the New Jersey Devils. Now, this contract would be much higher on the list, except he only has 1 year left on his deal, and that is what has this down at number 10. He's 32 years old, obviously D-man from the New Jersey Devils. He has 1 year left on his deal at $9 million per season. And this is a guy that last year in 44 games played had just 19 points and was a minus 16. And then back in 2019-2020, he played 68 games and only had 18 points and was a minus 21. It was the worst year of his career. I don't think PK Subban was ever worth $9 million a year, but he certainly hasn't been worth that in a long time if he ever was. So this is a terrible contract. Paying him $9 million is absolutely absurd, but it's not higher on the list because he only has 1 year left on his deal this coming season, and thankfully for New Jersey, he only has 1 year left on his deal. Coming in at number 9 from the Nashville Predators, we have center Matt Duchene. Duchene is 30 years old. He has 5 years left on his current contract, making $8 million per season. Last year in 2021, 34 games played, 13 points. That's right. He got paid $8 million last season to score 13 points. In the year before, in 2019-20, 66 games played, 42 points. So he was basically a third-line center putting up 42 points in 2020, and he's being paid $8 million a year. And the worst part is that he still has 5 years left on this contract. It's not looking good. This has buyout written all over it at the end here. I don't think he finishes this contract with the Nashville Predators. I don't know if he finishes this contract at all. But Matt Duchene is definitely one of the worst contracts in the NHL right now. And again, he's got to turn things back around really, really quickly, or this is going to end really badly. Coming in at number 8, I have Marc-Edouard Vlasic from the San Jose Sharks, another defenseman here on the list. He is 34 years old. He has 5 years left on his deal, making $7 million per season. Last year, in 51 games played, he had 6 points and was a minus 8. He had 6 points in 51 games. He's getting paid $7 million per season. 2019-2020, he played 70 games for the Sharks. He had 15 points and was a minus 10. Now, Marc-Edouard Vlasic at one time was very much worth $7 million a year. He was, I think, one of the most underrated and best defensive defensemen, shutdown guys in the league for a number of years. He is not even close to that anymore. He's absolutely fallen off a cliff over the past, I would say, 2 to 3 seasons. And not really sure what happened, but his entire game has just completely plummeted. And he's been brutal for the past 2 years. And he still has 5 years left on his deal as a 34-year-old. He is another guy that very likely does not see the end of this contract. And this is just an absolutely terrible one for San Jose. And San Jose has a lot of bad contracts, but this is really, really bad. Coming in at number 7, I have Evgeny Kuznetsov from the Washington Capitals. He's a 29-year-old center. He has 4 years left on his contract, making $7.8 million. And last year, in 41 games played, he just had 29 points. And the year before, in 2019-2020, he played 63 games and had just 52 points. Kuznetsov's career has gone significantly downhill over the past couple seasons, and he still has 4 years left on his deal, making almost $8 million per season. This is not good. I mean, this is a guy who is putting up 70 plus, even 80 plus points, and has just plummeted over the past couple of years. And he's had a lot of issues as far as his attitude and character goes. There's been a lot of reports about him possibly being traded by Washington and that they're trying to get rid of his contract, but in absolutely no way is he worth $7.8 million per season. Unless he goes back to being like 2018, Evgeny Kuznetsov real quickly here, this contract is an absolute disaster. And again, you're looking at a guy who might be putting up 40-something points this coming year, or even if he just reaches 50, there's in absolutely no way is that worth almost $8 million per season. So this is a really bad one for the Capitals, and I would not be surprised if he is moved by the Capitals as quickly if they can somehow find someone that will take him. I do think there's still potential upside here. Like, I don't know if he's ever going to be worth 7.8 mil, but if he can get back to being like a 60-point guy, you might be okay. But it's been a stark downhill decline for Kuznetsov, and now you have the availability issues. He's had some injuries. He's had some other locker room issues. He had the COVID issues last year. I don't know. It just doesn't seem worth the headache to me, but we'll see. Coming in at number 6, we have Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 30-year-old defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks now. He was just traded this offseason. He has 6 years left on his deal, making $7.26 million per season. And that is not including the retained salary that Arizona kept when they traded him to Vancouver. He originally was making $8.25 million per year on this contract. Obviously, Arizona retained just under $1 million when they traded him, but still making $7.26 million per season from Vancouver. This is one of the absolute worst contracts in the league. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson has really declined over the last few seasons. And last year he had 46 games played. He had just 24 points and was a minus 17. And in 2019-2020, he played 66 games and had just 30 points and was a minus 3. His defensive zone play is downright brutal at times. He was looked at as, when he was coming up and when he was younger, he was looked at as one of the best up-and-coming offensive defensemen in the league. His point totals have never really gotten that high. He never became the superstar defenseman that he was supposed to. And his offensive production has really dipped over the past few years as well. And then the defensive side of things, he's just not very good defensively. So in no way is Oliver Ekman-Larsson worth this kind of money. He still has a ridiculous 6 years left on this contract, which really adds to how bad it is because you're just stuck paying him for so much longer. He's going to be 36 when this deal is up. This is not going to end well. Definitely one of the worst contracts in the league. But now it is time to get into the top 5, the 5 worst contracts in the NHL right now. And coming in at number 5 for me, and this pains me a little bit to say because I really do like the player, but Jamie Benn for the Dallas Stars, left wing, can also play center. The offensive production has just declined so much, and he still has 4 years left on his deal, making $9.5 million per season. And don't get me wrong, I love Jamie Benn. He's a power forward. He brings a ton of leadership. He's tough. He plays physically. I'm a huge Jamie Benn fan, but in absolutely no way is he worth $9.5 million per season. And he's 32 with 4 years left on this deal. And we know what happens to power forwards and how much they can decline post 30. Look what happened to Milan Lucic. Look what happened to David Backes. And the list goes on and on and on with power forwards. Now, I'm not saying Benn is going to get, as bad as David Backes got or anything like that, but you have that type of player in his 30s now, making $9.5 million per season, who's already seen a significant decline in his offensive production. He had just 35 points in 52 games last season, and back in 2019-2020, he played 69 games and had just 39 points. So, I mean, this guy isn't even a 50-point guy anymore, let alone being like an 80-point guy. I mean, if you're making $9.5 million per year, you should be a point-per-game player. And especially as a forward, you should be a point-per-game player. And this is a guy who probably won't even have 50 points next season. That's just a bad contract. So as much as I do like Jamie Benn and really love his play style and what he brings to the table, the offensive production has significantly dropped, and he is not worth anything close to $9.5 million per year. Coming in at number 4. This one I debated as to whether I could put it on the list or not because he hasn't actually played under this contract yet. You probably know who I'm talking about. It's Seth Jones. Now, Seth Jones just signed this extension. He still has 1 year left on his current deal, and then this extension will kick in after this coming season in 2021-22. But the Chicago Blackhawks signed 26-year-old defenseman Seth Jones to an 8-year contract extension worth $9.5 million per season. And Jones is coming off the worst year of his NHL career and 3 straight years of decline in point production and overall play on the ice. I mean, he hasn't technically played under this contract yet, but this could go so bad for Chicago. This could be an absolute disaster. Now, there is the chance that Jones turns his game around in Chicago. He obviously has spent his last few years with the Columbus Blue Jackets. He's getting a change of scenery after the trade. He could turn things around and make this somewhat okay. I don't think he's ever going to be worth $9.5 million. But if he gets his game somewhat back on track, it might not be a terrible contract. If he plays like he has for the past couple of years, this is going to be one of the worst contracts in the league for the next almost decade. 2021, 56 games played. He had just 18 points and was minus 18. 2019-20, 56 games played, 30 points, plus 10. Not great point production, but at least a plus player, decent on the back end. 2021 was an absolute disaster for Seth Jones. But the biggest problem I have is that Seth Jones has one career season over 50 points. One. In what world is this worth $9.5 million? Even if he matches his career best season and scores 57 points this year, a 57-point defenseman is really not worth $9.5 million. You gotta be looking at, if you're making that kind of money, you gotta be one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Like, you've got to be a Norris Trophy candidate if you're going to be making $9.5 million. And Seth Jones has never been a Norris-level defenseman. His defensive zone play has significantly declined over the past number of years. His point production has gone down for 3 straight seasons now after that 57-point year. It's gone one step down, another step down, and then a huge step down last year. It's been 3 straight seasons of decline. It's been worse defensive zone play and declining point production. And then you give him an 8-year deal at literally Norris Trophy winning money. $9.5 million per year. He is making more than Cale Makar. He is making more than Alex Pietrangelo. He is making more than Victor Hedman. he is making more than almost all of the other top defensemen in the league. And actually, the defensemen that are making more than him also have really bad contracts. Guys like Drew Doughty and Erik Karlsson also have really bad contracts. So listen, he's 26. There is potential here. There is upside if he can get his career back on track and get back to being a 50-plus point guy. But there's also potential for this to be a huge disaster. And given the way he's played for the past couple years, it's much more likely to be a huge disaster. And I cannot see this contract going well. Speaking of defensemen on really bad contracts, number 3, Erik Karlsson from the San Jose Sharks. Another Sharks defenseman on the list. And honestly, I probably could have had Brent Burns on this list as well, but I think that Vlasic and Karlsson's contracts are egregiously bad, and at least Burns still brings some offensive upside. But Erik Karlsson has completely fallen off a cliff over the past few years. 31 years old, 6 years left on his deal at $11.5 million. He's one of the highest paid players in the entire NHL, $11.5 million per season. He had 22 points last year and was minus 18. And the year before, in 2019-20, he played 56 games. He had 40 points and was minus 15. He's atrocious in the defensive zone. His offensive numbers have significantly declined. At one point, Erik Karlsson was the best offensive defenseman in probably the modern era of the NHL. Like, you could arguably say that he's maybe the best offensive defenseman post-2005 lockout, like in his prime. But he played the 2017 playoffs on the bad foot, and he's never been the same since. And the injuries have caught up to him. The offense is completely fallen off. The defensive play is horrendous. And you have a guy now making $11.5 million to score 22 points and be a heavy minus player. This is an abysmal contract. Could be number 1 on the list. Honestly, I think all these top 3 all could have been number 1. You could put these top 3 in any order, and I think they're easily the 3 worst deals in the NHL right now. But Erik Karlsson is going to be 37 years old, if he's even still playing at 37 years old, when this contract is up, and he is making $11.5 million. It does not really get worse than this. But number 2 on the list, I have slightly worse. Sergei Bobrovsky, the only goaltender on the list. Sergei Bobrovsky, 32 years old, goalie for the Florida Panthers, about to be the backup goalie for the Florida Panthers. 5 years left on his deal at $10 million per season. And this guy, since going to the Panthers and signing this contract in 2 seasons with Florida, last year he played 31 games and had a 2.91 goals against with a .906 save percentage, which is not great numbers. And that's an upgrade over what he did in 2019-2020, where he played 50 games for the Panthers and had a 3.23 goals against and a .900 save percentage on the dot. Those are bad backup goalie numbers. And this guy's getting paid $10 million a year. Should be a Vezina level guy. Should be one of the 5 best goalies in the league. He has been nothing short of a massive disappointment for the Florida Panthers. And Spencer Knight is NHL ready. He's going to take over that net in Florida. And Sergei Bobrovsky is going to be a $10 million backup when Spencer Knight is the starting goaltender. This contract has never made sense for the Florida Panthers. Even when they signed him and he was coming off a great season in Columbus, you knew you had Spencer Knight in the pipeline. You knew you had one of the best young goaltending prospects in your pipeline. Why you would ever spend a 7-year deal at $10 million per on a veteran goalie makes 0 sense. But not only did that contract make 0 sense from the start, it looks absolutely terrible now because your $10 million goalie, who is supposed to be a Vezina candidate, has been absolutely horrible for 2 seasons. And now he's going to be relegated to backup very, very soon. And I mean, this contract is pretty much untradeable. No one's going to take Bobrovsky at this money at this point, given how he's played for the past 2 years. He's already into his 30s, pushing into his mid-30s. He has 5 years left on his deal, and you have one of the best young goaltending prospects in the league, and you're ready to take over at this point. This is just an absolute disaster for the Florida Panthers. But there's one contract worse. I think looking at this list, you probably know who it is. Jeff Skinner, Buffalo Sabres, 29-year-old left wing, 6 years left on his deal, $9 million per season. He had 14 points last year. This guy is supposed to be a scoring winger. He had 14 points all of last season, 53 games, not 14 goals, which would also be terrible. 14 points and was minus 11. In 2019-2020, he played 59 games. This was his first year on this new contract. 23 points and was minus 22. Jeff Skinner, in my opinion, has the worst contract in the NHL. This guy had 140-goal season, and Buffalo gave him the kind of contract that you give a superstar player after 140-goal year. And since that season, he had a year with 23 points and a year with 14 points. He got relegated to the fourth line last year. You have a $9 million fourth liner for the next 6 years for the Buffalo Sabres. This is the worst contract in the NHL, in my opinion. Like I said, really the top three are all interchangeable. They're all equally atrocious. But Jeff Skinner making $9 million a year to score 14 points is absolutely horrendous. He's also terrible defensively, and he plays on the worst team in the league in Buffalo. This guy is just, I don't have words how awful this is. I mean, this is the epitome of why the Buffalo Sabres have been a laughingstock for the last decade. Contracts like this are the reason why, and to me, Skinner's deal is the absolute worst. This was an absolutely awful contract from the start. They committed to him way too much, way too long after one high-scoring season, and he's done absolutely nothing since but be a massive disappointment. So those, in my opinion, are the 10 worst contracts in the NHL right now. There are a lot of bad deals, but these guys are making huge amounts of money and are not even close to worth what they're making on their current deals. So that's those are my top 10 worst. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys soon.